22 minutes past 9 this Thursday morning. Very good to have you with us. My next guest is David Icke. He's a former footballer and sports broadcaster. He's now known as a professional conspiracy theorist. He describes himself as a full-time investigative journalist searching for the truth of what's really going on in the world. The author of over 20 books, has lectured in over 25 countries, speaking for up to 10 hours to audiences all over the world, and he's appearing, I should say, in the Helix in Dublin tomorrow night to talk about his book, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. Dave, good morning.
Morning, Ryan.
Thanks for coming to see us today.
Pleasure.
Your talk tomorrow in Dublin is sold out.
Yeah, they nearly all are these days, anywhere in the world. People will remember me as the apparent nutter subjected to historic levels of ridicule, and I think the mainstream media and people in general thought that a corpse had been left in the gutter, and that was it. But the corpse got up, started walking, started running, and now it's sprinting. And suddenly there's been this enormous explosion of interest in my work in the last, particularly in the last 3-4 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you welcome on stage David Icke?
Thank you. Thank you. Whoa. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do.
Do you think there could be other life other than humans?
I do.
Yeah.
You're the one with the theory, not me.
Yeah. You don't even know what my theories are.
If you don't give them any reason to believe in you, they will dismiss you as a crank. They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you.
Fine.
Yes, it's the saddest experience you ever know.
I have to be stopped.
To stop you telling lies.
Answer the question.
To stop you telling lies. You're such a thick head.
This is politics, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, I know people put a lot of work into conspiracy theories, but I still think they're actually intellectually lazy.
My last book, before the present one, is 1,000 pages. Have you read any of my books?
No.
How do you know that it's intellectually lazy?
Your story is extraordinary. Do you mind if we go back to the beginning?
No,
because I think it's a perfectly appropriate place to start. Because I remember watching you when I was a kid on the morning television program.
That's right, breakfast television. Well, I was born in Leicester in the English Midlands in 1952. It was what they call in Britain a working class family. That just means we never had any money. I had a great childhood because I didn't have phones. I didn't have computers. I just had the world to explore. My time as a kid was spent playing football and watching steam trains, basically. And I remember my first day at school, a little infant school. I went to school in the morning. My mother said I had to go. I didn't know what it was all about. School, what's all that about? And at lunchtime, I'd had enough. So I ran home. Lunchtime on my first day, and I said to my mother, no, I don't like that, I'm not going back. I said, I want to go down the shops like we always do, you know what I mean? And she said, oh, you got to go. And so I had to go and stick it. I wasn't a confident lad, and the good things in life always happen to other people. They weren't going to happen to me. Because, you know, when you were brought up on in a working class background in the 1950s and 60s, you were pretty much going to go off and work in a factory, or you were going to work in an office or something like that. But from the earliest age, when I realized these options, I thought, I'm not doing that. Now, just to the right here is Leicester City Football Club. It's a new ground now, but it's right next to the old one. On Saturdays, I used to come down here and watch Leicester City Football Club play. I used to get in the ground, one of the first people in, so I could get right behind the goal. And I watched Gordon Banks at real close range for years, and that's how I learned to become a goalkeeper, just watching him play. And then eventually Leicester City got interested in me as a player when I was at school, and I used to come down here and train with them. That shop over there, that everyday shop, used to be an electrical store, and myself and Linda, back in the 1970s, used to live above that in the flat. We used to rent it, and it was so cold. I used to go to bed every night in the winter in an overcoat. It was all we could afford at the time. I was working as a journalist in Leicester in a local newspaper, which didn't pay a lot. The Cube, that's quite relevant, isn't it? I set out on a world speaking tour in the summer of 2016 because I could feel that more and more people were starting to feel uneasy about the world. They didn't like the way it was going. And I just felt that there was an ever-gathering number of people who would be open to hearing maybe what is going on.
Back in the day, obviously, it was a real battle to try and get anyone to listen, to be honest. Like, you know, when Dad was doing his talks, he was talking to 5, 6, 7 people sometimes, you know, and in a theatre that held hundreds, you know, so it was probably quite an embarrassing scenario, really.
There was nobody, hardly. I mean, there was a really nice group of people around David, and when we used to go and be part of the talks and the workshops, yeah, there was a man and a dog quite often coming to these talks.
Putting out the chairs, no one comes. Putting back the chairs and leaving poorer than when you arrived.
But you always had a sense that something bigger was going to happen, you know. But it was tough back then.
And I'm feeling quite emotional tonight, really. To think, 60 years later, 60 frickin' years later, I keep getting flashbacks of people at school that I remember, and football games that I played in, and wondering where they all are now. You know, there might be some out there, I don't know. It's almost like a circle completed coming back here. I can't really explain it. I just feel very strange. It's a special moment for me. It really is a very special night.
Cheers, folks. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you welcome on stage David Icke?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hey, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Whoa, back in Leicester after all these years. Bloody hell. I love Leicester. It's amazing to think that a snotty-nosed kid on the Goodwood estate, with his shirt hanging out all the time, it seemed, and 60 years later, you're standing here talking about this stuff. Life's so funny because you never know where it's going until you get there, do you? It's becoming more and more of a challenge to find places to speak without it being cancelled. And I just want to pay tribute to my son, Jamie, you've seen him, the big lad, who has this uncanny ability to move the pieces around so that when people trying to silence me move a piece here, then he says checkmate there and somehow finds another venue. So I like to pay tribute to him.
Every single event that we've done anywhere in the world, there's been certain groups that have contacted venues, made outrageous libelous claims about what David's going to speak about, and have, in many cases, got venues to cancel on us.
They tell the organisers that I'm going to go on the stage and I'm going to say a stream of racist things, none of which I have ever said, none of which am I ever going to say. What then happens, staggeringly, is that instead of coming to you and saying, well, these people have said you're going to say this, you're going to say that, what's going on? They pull the event. And we hear about the event we've been organising for months being cancelled. We hear about it in the media.
In Germany alone, for example, I've been in touch with over 70 venues, and we've still never managed to pull off a Germany show. And there's a venue that we had in Berlin, which to this day, nigh on well over a year, have never actually contacted me to tell me the event's been cancelled. I found out from a German newspaper when they published a story about it.
And my website is blocked in schools and universities and colleges. It's blocked in government departments and government agencies. And here's me, one person, who was supposed to be this great nutter, and the system is desperate to silence what I'm putting out and to stop as many people as possible ever hearing it. Why? I've agreed with the government, because I always do what the government tells me. I've agreed with the government and the mainstream media to issue this warning before we start. There are no conspiracies. I want to make that clear. There are no conspiracies. No one in the entirety of human history has ever conspired with anyone else to bring about a desired outcome. Anyone who says so is a kook, except if you say it's the Russians, it's always true. Every time. This is one of the big things going on today, so important in terms of human freedom. We have the new religion of I am offended. It's about transitory, illusory, irrelevant labels. People get offended about what people say about their race, their religion, their politics, their gender, their culture. All these labels that we give ourselves that are not actually who we are, they're what we're experiencing. And yet, these labels are used to create offense and also the classic divide and rule.
We begin tonight with that breaking news, a horrific scene in Charlottesville, Virginia, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence and chaos, the hate boiling over white supremacists and countered protesters fighting with fists and clubs. Confederate flags on full display, the governor declaring a state of emergency.
The car just plowed through hundreds of people downtown Charlottesville.
I am man, woman, black, white, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, middle class, working class, name, age, and birth date. I am my labels. I am a label. I have fallen into label consciousness. When all along, the true self, the true I, the infinite I, that which leaves the body and attains its consciousness, indeed expands its consciousness as it leaves the body, filter, focus, we are simply awareness, a state of being aware. What is race? Same consciousness, different color vehicle. That's all it is. What is sexuality? Same consciousness, different experience. That's all it is. It's not the color of our skin that makes us different, it's the color of our thoughts. Or as Martin Luther King put it, it's not the color of our skin, it's the content of our character. And we can become so focused on the 5 sense labels that we cease to be influenced by the vastness of consciousness beyond it. If we isolate ourselves, and this is what the system wants us to do, with self-identity, only with the experiences, then we don't let our minds flow into the infinity beyond this reality and all that insight, knowledge, understanding, intuitive knowing that is kept from us. One of the great keys to human enslavement, individual and collective, is to sell the idea that your target population is free. The illusion of freedom. Because people who believe they are free do not rebel about the fact that they're not. The key to it all, however, is slavery of the mind. This is a guy called Edward Bernays. He's still known today as the father of PR, what we would call now spin. He said, we are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. People are rarely aware of the real reasons which motivate their actions. He called it the invisible government. It's that which dictates perception. I call it the program. One big program. That's what human life is if we allow it to be, from cradle to grave. And I call this hoax, this program, the postage stamp consensus. This is what people are downloading all their lives if they allow it to happen. Get them early and keep them for life. It goes like this. You come out of the womb, well, immediately you are having your perceptions influenced by your parents. Not because they're bad people, not because they're doing it malevolently, but they've been through the process you're about to go through and they've bought it. They think it's the right thing to do to pass it on to you. And then, in a ridiculously short time, what is it now, 3-4 years? You've come out of the, we've only just bloody got here. And now you're sitting at a desk and an authority figure representing the state is telling you what is, what isn't, what's possible, what's not possible. What has happened, what has not happened, how things are not. They're telling you when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can eat, when you can talk, when you can go to the toilet. And then you go through all your formative years downloading this program. I'm on the postage stamp, and it is a desperately limited range of possibility, which runs science, which runs medicine, which runs politics, which runs journalism, etc. And if you stand on the postage stamp, you live in the real world. You're credible. But you step off the postage stamp. Actually, I think there's more to know than just that. You know, you're mad, you're dangerous, you're all these things. Stop these meetings. Because the postage stamp consensus is what holds us in perceptual servitude all our lives if we allow it to. And what is the postage stamp consensus? Oh, hold on a minute, I'm getting something. Yeah, yes, bullshit. That's what it is. The fewer choices you have, the less freedom you have. And the way the system is structured, money dictates choice in the great overwhelming vastness of human society. And that's why, the real reason why money is controlled as it is. People say, oh, it's a greed. Well, on one level it is. But the real reason for the control of money and finance globally is control. Now the system says, we have the things you need to survive. So what you do is you do what we say, you work as we say, and then you will earn money from us for buying the things that allow you to survive, and you buy them by giving that money back to us. This is a conspiracy to enslave all of us. And if we don't come together, it will happen. If we do, it will not.
Occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street. Wall Street.
Wall Street. Obviously, I've heard of it. I've seen it on television.
Whenever you have the taxpayer trying to bail out the elite investors, a small group of elite investors, I think you have trouble.
What is the banking system except almost the ultimate network of parasites feeding off the efforts and the labor of the target population? And the whole banking system is based on a gigantic hoax. And that is, you lend people money that doesn't exist and charge them interest on it. Laws have been passed that allow banks to lend massively more than they actually have. And it's called fractional reserve lending. So when you go into a bank and you ask for £100,000, they type into your account £100,000 of credit, which is money that has never, does not, and will never exist. But you're not paying back £100,000. You're paying back £100,000 plus interest. The interest is never created. So at no point, on purpose, is there even nearly enough money in circulation, theoretical or otherwise, to pay back all the principal of the debt and all the interest on the debt. In other words, people losing their land, homes, resources, everything is built into the system on purpose. You know, one of the things that I talk about is non-violent non-cooperation. You know, the few can't control the many unless the many allow it. I was speaking in Croatia, in Zagreb, and someone said to me, did you know there's a political party here in Parliament that was inspired by your work? And of course, you know, jaw drop, what?
My name is Ivan Pernar. I am a member of Croatian Parliament. When I have seen that there are many policies that government execute and people are opposed to, I wondered if it's possible to create a political party which would reflect popular opinion, popular will, and not the will of this elite establishment, so on. And so I decided to create my own party. Our party name is Živi zid. It means like a living wall. It came because we were obstructing evictions, because the banks evict a lot of people who can't pay off debt. And we claim that in current debt-based monetary system, debt can't be repaid.
So they started ringing houses that were about to be foreclosed and the bailiffs were coming with people who just wouldn't let it happen. And they streamed this live on the internet, and they got a lot of coverage and a lot of interest, a lot of support.
I think the greatest issue is people not knowing how monetary system works. If they would know, they would challenge it and everybody would live much better off. But of course, the government does not want people to fight the elite, and in order to prevent them from this kind of warfare, they need to divide society within itself.
Priznaju da mi smo stvorili ISIL, da mi smo ih naoružali, da mi smo ih financirali kako bi maknuli sirijsku vladu. Zašto se onda ne kaže? Zašto se ne kaže otvoreno?
You realize that there is a whole awakening movement around the world, and when I saw what Icke is doing, like I was a bit jealous on him. Like, wow, look at what this guy is doing, you know. I wish I could do something like him. But I knew I would never be a world-known author or whatever. And I then said, well, I can't do what he's doing, but I can challenge this system against which he's speaking about locally. And in essence, we managed to pass into parliament. In a single year, we almost tripled our support. So there is exponential growth, and other political parties, they are falling down. Because what the system wants is this traditional division, or left, right, center, whatever. Like in Croatia, we would say, I'm Croatian, you are Serb, or you're Muslim, I'm a Christian. And we say, no. We reject that division. We believe in division between top 1% and the 99% who are not at the top and who are being pressured into supporting the system which is working against them. They're frightened of us. People ask me, are you afraid? I say, no, they're afraid, because people don't realize what's their power. They don't understand that it's people who vote elected officials. They don't elect themselves. So if people control election process, if they participate in it as voters, they can decide who will represent them, and they can challenge it fully.
And it just shows the potential. If people will stop saying, what are they going to do about it, and start saying what we are going to do about it, this political party in Croatia shows what is possible. From the turn of 1989, when I was in a room alone, it felt like there was something there, a presence you might call it. And this through 1989 got stronger and stronger and stronger and more tangible, until in early 1990, I'm with my son Gareth, who's a little boy then, and we're on the seafront in the town where I live, next to a news shop, and sold a few books. And I walked in to this shop where Gareth was looking at the books, and as I turned to say to him, come on Gareth, we'll go and get some lunch, the atmosphere around me changed. And just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks before, maybe even less, I'd been sitting in a hotel room in London when I was working for the BBC, and this presence was so tangible, I actually said out into the room, would you please contact me if there's something there, because you're driving me up the wall. And so shortly after that, I'm in this news shop, and the atmosphere changed around me. And I heard not a voice, but a very strong thought form say to me, go and look at the books on the far side. So in a daze, I start walking towards these books, and I got there, and in among these novels was one book with a woman's face on the front called Mind to Mind by a woman called Betty Shine. I picked it up because it was different, turned it over, read the blurb. This lady is a professional psychic and this is her life story. Immediately I saw that blurb, what I felt, I wonder if this lady would pick up what I've been feeling around me in the last year. So I read the book in 24 hours, contacted her, went to see her, didn't tell her anything. She reels her head back and she said, my God, I've got to close my eyes for this one, this is powerful. And there I am sitting there in March 1990, and this lady starts telling me what this presence in her mind is telling her to tell me, that I'm going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets. That one man cannot change the world, but one man can communicate the message that can change the world. That I was now going out onto a world stage. I would eventually be world famous. I would face enormous opposition, but they would always be there to protect me. And what was going to happen is they were going to lead me to knowledge, and at other times they were going to put knowledge into my mind directly. From that time, after I left Betty Shine's house, my life became this incredible synchronistic journey of walking into information, having insight, which later proved to be correct by the unveiling of information. And that has now gone on for the last nearly 30 years. But from about the turn of the millennium, the key thing came. And that was an understanding of what reality is.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very kind. Thank you. I'll quit while I'm ahead, you know. Lovely to be back in Dublin, and lovely to be back at the Helix. The first one to control perception is controlling the perception of reality itself. Now, if we don't understand the very reality that we're experiencing and interacting with, how can we understand anything? We live not in a world, but in a band of frequency, actually in a band of information within that frequency. But we are aware and live within, in terms of our perception, a tiny, tiny fraction of it. This scene from The Matrix is absolutely spot on.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe?
Morpheus and Neo are in a computer simulation akin to this. And Neo said,
This isn't real.
This isn't real? And Morpheus said,
what is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
And that is all this reality is.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo.
This reality is nothing like we think it is. Up to the 1920s, mainstream science said there was one galaxy, the Milky Way. Less than 100 years later, the highest estimate is 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. From 1 to 2 trillion in less than 100 years? As Socrates in ancient Greece is supposed to have said, wisdom is knowing how little we know. Planet Earth is by comparison the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. Look into the night sky. Look at that blaze of stars and lights. Do you see everything that exists in the space that you are looking at? And most people would say, yeah, well, of course, mate, yeah. And yet, that is not even fractionally true. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what exists in the universe, in energy and other forms. But visible light, which is the only frequency band that we can see, is a tiny smear of the 0.005%. Humans are basically blind to what exists.
This could be some simulation.
It could. Do you entertain that?
Well, the argument for the simulation, I think, is quite strong.
This is real? When I touch that
It feels
wood?
very real. Where are you? Where are you really?
Right.
You aren't anywhere.
Well, where is...
You're in the computer.
What defines where you are? Meanwhile, your experience is
Why do you
radically
think you're
different.
where you are right now? You might not be.
I'll spark up a joint if you keep talking. Your manager's gonna come in here. We might have to lock the door.
Right now, you think you're in a studio in LA.
That's what I heard.
You might be in a computer.
We experience what is apparently a physical world, a solid physical world where everything is apart from everything else. And it appears to be outside of us, but it's not. Not in the way we experience it. The world out there that we experience as out there is actually in here. What is Wi-Fi? It's information carried in radiation fields. But you get a piece of technology called a computer, and it will tap in to those radiation fields, and it will decode them into a form on the screen which is absolutely nothing like the field is in its prime form.
And we are doing exactly the same to create the reality we think is so real. We live in a sea of information, of possibility, of probability, just like Wi-Fi. And through what I call the biological computer, the decoding processes of what we call the body, we are decoding information from that Wi-Fi field and putting it on our screen, which exists in here. When that construct takes place, we perceive what we believe to be an external world around us, but actually it's only going on in our heads. Think of the ear. The ear is taking vibrational information that we call sound. It's turning it into electrical information. It's communicating it to the brain, which then hears the sound. There's no sound passing between us. We hear sound only when we decode it. As I speak now, my vocal cords are creating a frequency field of information. Only when you decode those words in the way that I'm describing do you hear what I'm actually saying. We seem to be living in an external world of solidity when we're actually living in an illusory world, which in the decoded form is holographic.
When you see how close virtual reality is now getting to the reality we're experiencing. And the people at the cutting edge of this field say it won't be many years before you won't be able to know the difference.
We have that HTC Vive here, and I've only done it a couple times, quite honestly, because it kind of freaks me out.
Sure.
My kids fucking love it, man. They love it. They love playing these weirdo games and walking around with that headset on. But part of me watching them do it goes, wow, I wonder if this is like the precursor. Just sort of like if you look at that phone that Gordon Gekko had on the beach.
Yes,
and then you compare
the big
that,
cell phone.
Yeah, you compare that to like a Galaxy Note 9. Like,
Sure.
how the fuck did that become that, right? And I wonder when I see this HTC Vive, I'm like, what is that thing going to be 10 years from now when we're making fun of what it is now? What is it? How ingrained and how connected and interconnected is this technology going to be in our life?
It will be, at some point, indistinguishable from reality.
How do they manifest these virtual realities? By using exactly the same systems of decoding that we use to create this one. The gloves hack in to the touch senses. The headsets hack in to the sight senses and to the ear senses. And so what these games are doing is they are hacking in with an alternative source of information into these decoding senses that we use to create this reality, and that can appear to be so incredibly real. You're going to see people react to what is merely information being fed to their senses. Physics of computer games and the physics of our reality are basically the same. This is the revolution, and its time has come. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's fantastic when you get out there, because you just go into an energy field and it's almost like a state of bliss.
I've been saying all these years that if what you say has validity, it will eventually be shown to be so. And people are now coming to my work in ever-gathering numbers because of what I've said way back. So I say to people, speak your truth. The most astounding experience I've had in all this nearly 30 years came after I'd seen Betty shine, and then I wrote a book through that next few months called Truth Vibrations. And something intuitively, which is how I started to operate after this whole thing started, said, you've got to go to Peru, you've got to go to Peru. And I ended up at a place called Siustani, not far from Puno, on the shores of Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world. And I walk up to the top of this hill, and there's these stones and stuff, and I walk in among these stones, and then I heard, just like in the news shop, not a voice, but a strong thought form. It said, they'll be talking about this 100 years from now. It will be over when you feel the rain. Cloudless sky, piercing Peruvian sun. It will be over when you feel the rain. Icke, you're going mad, mate. And out of the mountains came this storm. And eventually I'm watching this wall of stair rod rain move towards me. What happened is this energy coming through me got more and more powerful, like being plugged into the mains. And then the rain hit me. I was deluged in a second. And the energy stopped. And I staggered forward like Bambi. And something phenomenal had happened in that moment, because it was like, when I look back, being in a bubble of perception all your life. And then someone comes along, no warning,
burst the bubble. And concepts, insights, knowledge, awareness was pouring into my conscious mind. And it was like someone pressing too many keys on a computer. The computer can't process the information because there's too much. And that's when I went into a period, only lasted 3 months, where I didn't know what I was doing or where I was or what was going on.
And then 1991, it just went bang.
I came back from Peru to Britain, and the book came out, Truth Vibrations, and I was invited onto a massively popular talk show, early evening on the BBC, called The Wogan Show, fronted by a guy called Terry Wogan, an Irish guy.
According to his book, The Truth Vibrations, the world as we know it is about to end. David Icke.
I remember this very clearly. 17 million people, I think, was the audience. It was absolutely massive. I was sitting there, the audience were laughing.
They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you. Fine.
David Icke, the person who had been the one that I identified with up to that point, was dying 1,000 deaths. And I was thinking to myself, my life's over.
Why should I impose my will? Why should I try to impose what I'm saying on anyone? They have the right to listen to what I'm saying,
but if you
to listen to what the traditional church is saying.
If you don't give them any kind of proof, if you don't give them any reason to believe in you, they will dismiss you as a crank, which is what they're doing.
Well, that's their free will choice.
But then, of course, the press just had a field day. We were ridiculed beyond belief. Press camped outside the house, followed us on holidays, followed the kids from school.
Primary school, Dad was like a hero, like a BBC presenter, massive. You know, all the kids would want to come play around the house, and then in literally like that, it was all of a sudden kids weren't coming around anymore, or I'd rather you didn't play with him because his dad's a bit, you know.
I lived my life to the sound of laughter. Distant laughter, sometimes in my face laughter. That you're that Ike guy who's gone crazy.
It was just amazing. Horrible time. Wouldn't wish it on anybody. To go and sit in a restaurant somewhere and have people, whole families pointing and laughing.
Going into a pub, forget it, there was uproar. And I went into this period of absolutely historic levels of ridicule. I have this phrase I've written in the books: life so often gives you your greatest gift, brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. And mass ridicule on that historic scale, in the face of it, was a worst nightmare. But it set me free. And what was that freedom? It was the freedom from fearing or being concerned by what other people think of you. We are in a period now where speaking your truth and not being intimidated into silence is not just important, it's utterly crucial to where humanity goes from here. If I had not have gone through that extraordinarily extreme experience and let go of this concern what other people think, does anybody think I would have talked and written about some of the things I have since? No way. You don't accept it? Don't accept it. Fine, but you're not going to stop me saying it. One of my great surprises over the years was to read in a newspaper about a program that's a radio program in Britain that's been running a very, very long time, called Desert Island Discs.
My castaway this week is the Pulitzer Prize winning writer Alice Walker.
And when she was asked, what book would you take to the desert island? She said,
I would like to take Human Race Get Off Your Knees by David Icke.
she said when I met her, there was this silence. Did she just say a book by David Icke? I met her and spent hours with her at her home in California, and it's one of the most memorable days of my life.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Delighted to have time to talk to you this time.
I know. Oh.
Hey.
I think David Icke is a great teacher, and I think he's really the right teacher for now because he's so present.
I've seen The View. I do not understand why you live here. What makes you live here?
Well,
You should live in downtown LA.
oh yeah, exactly. Well, you know, tough. Come on in.
Thank you. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
You look incredible.
Really?
You do.
Well, thank you.
You look incredible.
Goodness, that helps. I'm so happy that you could come, and I wanted to show you, you know, our part of the world. And this part right here has been very comforting, and it has a feeling of safety for me.
Got a great calmness about it.
Yeah. In fact, I was thinking about some of the similarities that we share.
Really?
And I was writing this book called The Temple of My Familiar. And honestly, the synchronicities were just like all the time. Living here, it supported that, you know. And in fact, that's one of my earliest connections to your work and feeling supported by similar energies.
Right.
So I felt comfortable with your work in a way that many people up until recently have not seemed to be.
No. Comfortable.
We have the same car.
We have the same car. We do. Even the same colour. That's incredible. Both sides of the Atlantic, same car, same car.
I don't know if anybody else could do it but him, actually. He somehow has all of the qualifications for presenting it with enough nerve, you know, just sheer nerve.
Something in the energetic field around you that you never feel alone.
Right.
There's always some support there.
Yeah.
And that's what drove me on when everyone else was saying crazy and this is nonsense.
Well, my Aquarian spirit helps me there because I've been trashed a lot, but I have this ability to just keep going and feel that support. I mean, from the time I was a child, we lived way in the country and we were very poor, and I used to have a stick that I would walk along the fence with, just making what music I could out of the sound of the stick on the fence, in perfect happiness, because I felt all around me, you know, that I was supported.
What I found that if a person just accepts, well, actually that I wasn't told the truth, was I? The next question is, well,
what else am I being lied
what
about?
else am I not being told that's not true? And the dominoes start to fall. I see that a lot. So
I think that we need him as a teacher because some of the subject matter is so strange to most people. Strange just mainly because they're not used to thinking outside of a certain, you know, box, if you will.
And I came across these other explanations for reality. I'd been a professional footballer, I'd been a journalist, I'd been a radio reporter, I'd been on television, I'd been in politics in the Green Party. I lived quite an expansive life. I'd never heard of it. And my first question, which actually started to lead me into the conspiracy, was why isn't this taught in schools? This is the stadium in which this whole human society is played out, keeping humanity in ignorance of itself.
So we can be used.
Yeah. If I've ever met a spiritual soulmate in terms of the way we see the world, then it's Alice Walker. She's just an incredible example of someone who doesn't just believe something, but lives it. And all these years later, she's still there, still driving on, still challenging imposition and challenging injustice. And it was an absolute joy
to spend time with her. I hope it's not the last time that we ever meet.
I love his mind, and I think for people who enjoy exploring the nature of reality and you know, unreality, what he teaches is very intriguing. I, for one, am just deeply grateful. I feel I've learned so much, and it makes me feel more at home in the mystery.
If you keep going and you don't give up and you don't apologize for being you, and if what you say has validity, then eventually it will come together. But if you don't keep going when all seems lost, when it seems that it's going nowhere and it's all a struggle, and the times when the waters break and the clouds open never comes. You know, no one said it would be easy.
Hey! Thank you! Thank you very much! Thank you! It's just incredible how many people are here tonight, because this was only thought of about, a month ago. But the interest now is incredible. And that's why they're trying to shut me up, and it becomes more difficult to find a venue big enough for all the people that want to come. And what this evening is about is context. This is what is absolutely missing, not least in the mainstream media, context. If you look at people, organizations, happenings, world events, in isolation, they look a certain way. But you put them in context, how they connect together to a common direction, and whoa, the world looks very, very, very different. The key is why they are happening. The why is what opens the vista up. The idea of the postage stamp is to keep us seeing only the pieces, never the picture, but connect the dots between these organizations, people, world events, happenings, and suddenly, so that's what's going on. This world of the seen is being manipulated from the unseen, which is almost the entirety of existence that we can't see. People can say we are free, and to them it may seem like it, being able to vote for someone every 4 or 5 years who then does it their like until they get the chance to vote again 4 or 5 years later. It's called freedom. But the idea is to not let us see the bars and not let us see the walls of the prison. What they want to do is to make sure we don't know what's going on, but that we don't know what's going on. How it works is you've got a spider at the center of the web, and then you've got these strands immediately around the spider. All this is in the unseen. And these secret societies, symbolized by those strands, are the most secretive, the most exclusive. Most of them don't even have names, so they're harder to uncover. And then as you come out from the spider, still in the hidden, you meet the secret societies we do know about, like the Freemasons and the Knights Templar and the Knights of Malta and Opus Dei and the inner circle of the Jesuit order and others. Now we hit the world that we see, or the world of governments and banking systems and corporations and government agencies. And at that point, we think that the decisions that are dictating to our lives are being made by those people. In the end, if you go deep enough or high enough, whichever symbol you want, you hit this force. But the vast overwhelming majority of people in these areas of society have no idea that that's the case, because of something called compartmentalization. And therefore, only a few at the top know the big picture. Everyone else only knows a part of it. What you do is you get some blokes in suits and you plonk a head on them, and you call them Republican or you call them Democrat. These are the here today, gone tomorrow politicians that are basically irrelevant. Because in the Republican Party, for instance, there's a group of people in the background called the neocons or neoconservatives. And they control the Republican Party and they control the Republican president. They're controlling Trump now. In the Democratic Party, you've got another group of people, and I call them the Democons. And they control the Democratic Party and whoever's in the presidency. They, at the next stage back into the hidden, answer to the same force. So whoever the here today, gone tomorrow politician is, that is always in control. It's known by some as the permanent government. And therefore, nothing changes. Whoever you vote for, the same direction of society continues because the people you're looking at are not the ones in control. So when you see these people that come to power, they don't come to power by accident. They come to power by design. The money, the media coverage, all of that goes to put them into power to serve this web. Some of them know a lot about what's happening. A lot of them know some of what's happening, and a lot of them know nothing. They're just malleable people who will sign the right paper and push the right policy on behalf of that in the hidden. And yet, if you don't know that, and most people don't, then you have people divided and ruled, fighting each other over which here today, gone tomorrow politician is the right one. And the hidden hand is laughing its pants off because that's exactly what they want, divide and rule. Whoa, a Route Master bus. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. I know some people have come from long distances. And this is the alternative tour of London. In America in particular now, the term deep state is almost common parlance. This hidden government, this global hidden government is always there. And one of the great centres of that is London. Down there is Downing Street, of course, and the Ministry of Defence. And Downing Street is another location for here today, gone tomorrow politicians. Hello, Teresa, are you all right? And that's the Bank of England, where they lend people money that doesn't exist and charge them interest on it. It's called organised crime in any other profession, but in banking it's legal. We're heading round now towards Buckingham Palace. It's kind of extraordinary when you think about it, that we think now that we're in a modern, advanced, mature society, but Britain, and indeed the countries of the Commonwealth, have their head of state chosen, to bring it down to basics, by who had sex with who in what order. That's it. That's how we choose who is the head of state in this country. They're in awe of them. You're not supposed to turn your back on the Queen. You have to back out the room. Oh, it's the Queen, but do we ever ask, why is she Queen? This royal phenomenon is an in-your-face example of what is called today the 1%. Over to the left is the place where most people think this country is run from, the Houses of Parliament. And if you can get the population to focus on the wrong place where the decisions are being made but aren't really, then you're not going to get people to see where the power and the direction of the world is being controlled from. And here we have to the right, on the other side of the river, the Tower of London. Maybe I'll end up there one day, who knows? Oh yeah, no probs.
Thank you very much.
I think the world is going in the wrong direction, but there's only him maybe talking about it, so it was really interesting to see it from first hand.
At least he's giving truths out there that plant a seed, and that's what the seed needs to do, plant and grow so everybody knows the truth, I think.
People don't seem to reject him as much anymore. They open up, and thankful for that, gratefully, yeah.
Well, the good thing about him is he knows how to laugh at himself, which I think is something that a lot of our politicians could learn a lesson from.
A quick series of dot connects to bring us to present day, show how this works. In the 1990s, a group was created in America called the Project for the New American Century. It was the neocon organization, the one behind the Republican Party. It was co-founded by Robert Kagan and William Kristol, and in it was Dick Cheney, who would become de facto president with Bush, Rumsfeld, who would be head of the Pentagon, the Defense Department, his deputy, Wolfowitz, Dov Zakheim, who controlled the entire budget of the Pentagon as comptroller, and this man, John Bolton, who's never seen a country he didn't want to bomb. And in September 2000, this lot produced a document. In this document, they called for American forces to fight and decisively win multiple simultaneous major theater wars. They named the countries: Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, North Korea, China. Nothing changes a status quo quicker or more permanently than a war. So, status quo, you have a war, new status quo. You have another war, new status quo. And each one's taking you nearer and nearer to your goal, which is the global centralization of power. How many people do you know that want a war? Hardly anybody. But we have them all the time. War after war after war after war. And it's this web that is driving these wars. This is why there is always money for war. Because the web is deciding what governments spend money on, and they want the war. So no one ever says, we can't go to war, we can't afford it. General Wesley Clark, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, he was interviewed in 2007, and he said that immediately after 9/11, he went to the Pentagon and was told by a general friend of his in the so-called Joint Chiefs of Staff that the decision had been made that America was going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. And the countries he named were the countries named by the Project for the New American Century in September 2000.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years."
Number 1, Bush, Republican, Blair, Labour, picked Iraq off the list because that's what they were told to do. And Iraq, of course, was invaded through weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist because it was on the list. It had to be targeted. They didn't have an excuse. They made one up. Then there's this transformation. Now, if we go from Labour to Cameron, David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, Conservative, and we go from Republican Bush to Democrat Obama. But what do? They tick Libya off the list, again, based on a lie, and they start the process to create the civil war in Syria. Now, Drain the Swamp Man comes in, and he's targeting Syria and more targeting Iran.
Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction. They do not respect their neighbors or borders or the sovereign rights of nations. Instead, Iran's leaders plunder the nation's resources to enrich themselves and to spread mayhem across the Middle East and far beyond.
The hidden hand is calling the shots. They come and they go. Where they want it to lead, if we let them, as I've been saying and writing since the 1990s, is World War III. They always plan 3 world wars. And what they want to do is play off NATO against Russia, China, and allies like Iran. And that's what this is all about. This insane demonization of Russia that goes on day after day after day. They're seeking to soften up global public opinion, Western public opinion, to accept a war. This is why you're having this massive NATO buildup of arms and troops on the borders of countries that border Russia.
Next, leaders from NATO countries met in Poland today to finalize plans to beef up the military alliance. For the first time since the Cold War, multinational troops will continuously rotate through 4 countries in Eastern Europe.
Russia has called this buildup a provocation. Is this a provocation?
I would view it as a deterrent. And if I was looking at it through the lens of a potential aggressor, I would say it's an exceptionally capable deterrent.
You've got all these troops, American troops, British troops, that think they're fighting for their country, when what they're doing is fighting for that force which is destroying their country and is aimed to create a nightmare world for their kids and their grandkids. If you keep invading countries like Iraq, then people will look up from the game show and go, hey, Ethel, they're invading someone else, what's going on? So what you do is you get the population, or some of it, in the target country to unseat the leader you want to remove. And this is the specialization of a group of organizations called the Open Society Foundations, run by this billionaire democon, George Soros. They were behind the manipulation of the Arab Spring. That went well for Arabs, didn't it, that? And they are behind what are called color revolutions, like the Rose Revolution in Georgia and the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, where they get the people to appear to have a revolution against the leader, but actually that's not what's really going on. Now, a few weeks ago now, George Soros announced that he was going to transfer $18 billion to his Open Society Foundation group, bringing his total donation so far to $32 billion. That's the kind of money that is there to be used to disrupt countries. And one of the Soros Open Society coups was in Ukraine when they replaced President Yanukovych that was looking to Russia with this guy Poroshenko, who's a puppet of America. And the person who oversaw that was Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State for Eurasian Affairs, who is the wife of the co-founder of the Project for the New American Century, Robert Kagan. When you get deep in the rabbit hole, it's a very, very, very small world. And the trigger for all this sequence that we're still seeing unfold, was 9/11. And in that document in September 2000, it said that unless there was a new Pearl Harbor, then this process of regime change would necessarily be slow. In the words of the document, further, the process of transformation is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. And 1 year to the month after this was published, 9 months after the people that wrote it came to power with Bush, America had what Bush called at the time the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century, which started the whole sequence running. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. This is why it's so important to uncover where they want to go, what their outcome is. Because once you know their outcome, seeing the steps every day towards that outcome are a doddle. But if you don't know the outcome, then these steps are now random. There seems to be no connection, but the outcome connects them. And this structure, this pyramid, is where it's all been leading. I call it the Hunger Games society. They want an elite 1% at its core, less than 1%. That dictate everything. They have all the wealth, they have all the power, they have control of the military, they have control of government, the whole shebang. At the bottom, they want the rest of humanity, basically. Even those who at the moment think they're doing okay, they've got some money in the bank, they've got a nice house and that stuff, none of this matters to me. If you're not in the 1%, they want that as well. And in between, they want this quite demonstrably unfolding around the world. Police state, actually in the end, police military state, to hold this status quo and to impose the will of the 1% on the population. The outcome is they want a world government, a world army, a world central bank dictating all finance, and a world electronic currency. This is why they are running around like headless chickens, trying to stop Brexit now. They never believed that anyone would vote to come out. Now they're trying to stop it because the idea is more and more countries are sucked into the EU, not that anyone leaves. And it's because they want a police military state where they both fuse that we're seeing the police look and act more and more like the military all the time. This is why a Pentagon program called 1033 is giving tanks to local police forces in America.
Someone has to explain why your local police department has gone from this to this.
Warren County, New York, population 65,000 and home to Lake George, is a wintertime postcard. Peaceful, picturesque, and well protected. This September, the Sheriff's Department took delivery of a fully armored, mine-resistant vehicle called an MRAP, the same piece of equipment used by soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I would be remiss at doing my job if I didn't prepare for the worst.
Bud York is the Warren County Sheriff.
I'm tasked with protecting the public and protecting my people. That accomplishes both of those goals.
Once you start dressing and equipping people like an occupying army, they start acting like one. Every day there's another story in the paper about cops beating innocent people. The video that's been making the rounds out here lately is a patrolman punching the lights out of a deranged homeless grandmother. Even worse, that's their training video.
So the web controls politics, money, commerce, media, military, science, medicine and religion, and thus controls perception and outcomes. So when we free our perceptions, we free our lives, and if enough of us do it, then the world becomes free into a world that instead of being a prison can become the paradise that it once was and can be again. Only because we change, the world must change. Because we are the world and the world is us. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Very kind. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Honestly, this is for James Holdsworth. James, to James. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you guys.
Bye. Cheers, mate. All the best. Thanks for coming. Where are we going? That way.
You enjoy that?
Fantastic, man. Great people. People who come to my events are absolutely fantastic people. They've got their hearts open.
Single time we release a tour, there's always contacted. When are you coming to Newcastle? When are you coming to the North East? Always.
This one, is it?
Yes, mate.
Cheers, mate. Oh, I enjoyed that so much. It's all worthwhile when you see people like that who, you know, their minds are open, their hearts are open. It's It's just brilliant, and it's a cross-section of the population. You know, there was a lot of people there tonight, I would take it, that would never heard it before, which is exactly what you want, really. I'll be sad when this little tour is over, really. I'm enjoying it, really, enormously. If we were going to be stopped, it was going to be in the old days when no one wanted to know. It's not going to be now. They're on the wrong side of history, that's for sure. Where we're sitting now, in this relatively small part of America, is the epicenter through which the end of humanity as we know it is being orchestrated. Up to this point, human perception has been controlled by controlling as much as they possibly could through religion, through media control, by controlling the information that people receive from which they form perceptions. Humanity has been manipulated to become clever in the sense of intellect, clever enough to build its own technological prison, but not wise enough to see that that's what it's doing. What we call today fantastic technological progress, not saying there's not some good things about it, but what it is in its totality, in its base form, is a prison for the human mind. People never ask this question. What is AI? This AI mind control, the assimilation, is unfolding before our eyes if we only see the outcome and therefore the steps towards it. If you're going to have people attached to technology, then their brains attached to technology and AI, you've got to get them addicted to it. Stage one, get them addicted to holdables, technology they hold, and start them as young as possible.
50% of teens report that they feel addicted to their cell phones.
There's nothing to do without a phone.
I know, like an iPad to like watch TV or something, but I can't read for like 5 hours straight.
I know. Reading's boring, I'm not reading.
This is the first study that shows a direct link between screen time and mental health. Researchers note that rates of anxiety and depression in young people have actually risen over 70%.
They call it digital heroin because it becomes an addiction, because the electronic stimulus and the digital stimulus becomes an addiction to the brain, just like a drug does. That's why they put them down and they have to pick them up again.
The frenzy does not seem to die down, but that's what Apple is hoping, with higher than ever stakes for your smartphone dollar. Here's ABC's Lindsay Janis.
Out of control lines, people waiting hours, even days. Apple fans across America don't appear to be losing any enthusiasm over the iPhone. Things in LA even turning violent. Check out this brawl that broke out after one man discovered someone had been paying homeless people to hold places in line.
After the holdables, wearables. You want to get in the body, so now the next stage is to get on the body. This is your Google Glass and your Apple Watch and your Bluetooth. And then, finally, implantables. Get inside the body. Gotcha.
The latest office innovation is a microchip implanted in the skin.
This is the first American company to ever try this.
So what are they tracking, and would you say yes if your boss asked you to do the same?
Turns out one of the biggest discoveries is actually this tiny. See how small that is? This little chip may be the next big thing, and it sounds like it's right from a sci-fi movie, but people all over the world are implanting these into their wrists.
Once you know the outcome, you can see the journey. And in terms of the ultimate endgame, which is to attach the human mind, the human brain to AI, so that AI, artificial intelligence, becomes the human mind, and the human mind as we know it is no more, you can see the progression there of the stepping stones. And this is why we are at the cusp of a massive choice that humanity has. Because if we go on down this road for not much longer, I mean, some of these major players in Silicon Valley, like Google's Ray Kurzweil, they're talking about this AI brain connection happening around 2030 onwards.
And let me summarize it for you. Now, today, I mean, you have a computer in your phone, but if you need 10,000 computers for a few seconds to do a complex search, you can access that for a second or two in the cloud. In the 2030s, you need some extra neocortex. You'll be able to connect to that in the cloud directly from your brain. And so over the next few decades, we're going to do it again. We're going to again expand our neocortex, only this time it won't be limited by a fixed architecture of enclosure. It'll be expanded without limit. That additional quantity will again be the enabling factor for another qualitative leap in culture and technology. Thank you very much.
The sales pitch of connecting the human brain to technology is it will make us superhuman. Oh, that would be great. But actually, even though they're that close to it, they still haven't seen it. They're still looking at dots and not seeing the picture. This is where it's all going. And we are sitting now in the epicenter of it, in front of a nondescript building that seems to just be a search engine, or Google, let's Google this, Google that. But actually, we're sitting at the epicenter of human control. What does the Pentagon and the intelligence agency complex want? It wants control of every bit of data it controls from the population. Silicon Valley gives it them. It wants to dictate what people see and don't see. Silicon Valley increasingly gives it to them. And it wants an AI-controlled human race, and through Silicon Valley and its corporations, that is what is being developed. Pentagon Inc. These are masquerading as private companies. They are Pentagon fronts. That's why they do what they do. You know, these organizations like DARPA and the CIA, they have their technological arms which seed fund corporations and technology that have a means of serving their agenda. And the CIA organization is called InQtel or IQT, which has seed funded these organizations. You know Siri, this Apple Office Assistant, and this Office Assistant technology, people have them all in their homes now. God knows why. It was seed funded by DARPA, the same organization that creates genetic extinction technologies and death rays. It takes a renegade mind that looks at it in a different way, and especially an outside mind that's not in it, to see the blatantly obvious. If we don't see the picture, then the future for humanity is very unpleasant indeed. If we do see the picture and head it off, then we can start to build a world worth living in. People have reminded me over the years of that famous quote by Gandhi, which said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. I went through the period of ridicule. I went through the period of being ignored. I went through the period of being laughed at in the street. And now it's completely changed. Instead of being laughed at in the street around the world, I'm stopped in the street to talk seriously about the information. Instead of wondering where the next audience is coming from, as I used to say, I could have spoken in a phone box for many years and there'd still be room. The interest is fantastic.
People are just waking up, which is amazing. And I think it's becoming more obvious now. I think as the agenda is obviously going nearer and nearer and nearer to the end goal, it's just opening itself up and it's becoming more and more obvious. That's encouraging massively.
People aren't buying it anymore. They're not buying the official explanation of everything.
And just more and more people are mistrusting of their
of their mainstream media sources and their politicians and so on, because they've been given so many examples over the years that they can't be trusted.
I feel the genie's out of the bottle and it's not going back. We had a tax imposed in the 1980s by Margaret Thatcher called the poll tax. It was a desperately unjust tax, and large numbers of people simply refused to pay the tax. What happened? They had to change the tax and drop it. Not only that, it was the start of the end for Margaret Thatcher, who was perceived as the Iron Lady and who was impregnable. And all people have done is say, no, not doing it. Someone comes out of Downing Street, someone comes out of the White House. They say, we've had a meeting and this is what's going to happen. What if enough people say, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. Where is their power? There is none. The power of the few is in the acquiescence of the many. And if we stop acquiescing with our own enslavement, we cannot be enslaved. We are at a fork in the road. If we go on as we are, we'll live in a fascistic Orwellian global state within decades. And I'm being seriously optimistic when I say decades. If we take our power back and we start questioning and we stop fighting among ourselves, then 7.5 billion people can't be controlled by a handful. If the 7.5 billion, A, know what's going on, and B, won't have it. My whole life has been synchronistic when I look back. Amazing coincidences leading me in certain directions. But since I had my mind explosion in 1991, the synchronicity have been unbelievable. And here we are, we're filming about, my life, which is about defending and expanding freedom. We've come onto the pier where I stood as a kid watching steam trains go past. And there's some kids here on the beach, and look what they're writing in the sand.
Freedom!
Freedom!
It's freedom!
I get emotional with it. Because of what's happening in the world compared with what could be happening. The enslavement that could be freedom, the illness that could be health. That's what drives me on, knowing what it could be. I can see it, traveling around the world and seeing people awakening, seeing through the bullshit, seeing through the hoax, seeing through the manipulation, which is what is holding us in servitude. And the kind of people that are seeing it, former system people who you never think would see it, young people are seeing it, people in their latter years are seeing it. There is something happening. There's something happening. This is just something simple like this. It's just so freaking symbolic of where we are going, and we must not stop until it happens. I mean, what kind of world are those kids going to live in if we go on as we are? But we're not going to. Much as that will distress those that wish it to happen. Good. There is an end game, and it's here. That drives me on. That gets me up in the morning every day to go on pounding this out. It's what gets me, on planes all the time, going around the world talking. And if you look at the history of the world, it's renegades, by that definition, that are the only people that have ever changed anything. Martin Luther King was a renegade. Gandhi was a renegade. Over and over again, across all the institutions, you've had medical renegades and scientific renegades, political renegades, and they're always the ones that change anything. Why? Because they're challenging the status quo. It's the only way we're going to change anything. The world needs renegades, and it needs them now, and it needs them fast. This is another example of the ritualistic madness. This guy wearing all this uniform on a hot day, sitting on a horse, and they just, well, the horse does, stands there. I can imagine what that must be like for the horse. And people go along and have their picture taken next to this. And there's another one over there. And what the fuck?
You see Siddiq counter that because he's the one, he's the mayor and he agrees on that.
So you need a press pass to stand on the pavement to take a picture of a man on a horse when the public can take as many as they want. That seems strange. Do you think that's strange?
I don't believe it's strange. I think it's weird.
Okay, let's go. I think it's strange. I think it's mad. You can't take a picture of that man on that horse for a documentary. You can only do it for personal use. It's like marijuana, isn't it?
And now I need to know, is this real love? Or is it just madness keeping us afloat?
One aspect of shutting down opinions and information that the system doesn't want circulating is to absolutely intimidate people into silence. And out of this building, of course, has come the infamous Twitter storm. That's when you post something that's outside of the official narrative and whoa, you get endless abuse. I have a methodology of dealing with Twitter storms, and it goes like that, okay? If you don't agree with what I say, please be my guest, because that's your human right, that's your freedom. But if you think that you can have an opinion and I can't, well, see that, because I don't give a shit. You have a right to freedom, great. And you want that, don't you? Oh yeah, I have freedom, I just say what I like. Well, I have that right too, and so does everyone else. And if you don't like that, well, have some of that.